Roger, you lost the MAGA crowd at... Let me explain this.
Hi, I'm Andy,
And I'm Roger,
and welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today. It's
a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy,
Roger?
how you doing?
Oh, pretty tired.
Yeah, why are you tired?
I'm just ready for some sleep. Yeah, so...
So it's a good thing you're talking to me about some light topics tonight. Well, I want to.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get woken up, right?
I think you might actually. This one might make your blood boil.
Get me passionate. Get me, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've got just the ticket. So
Heat me up.
I have. We get some questions obviously from our listeners, and I felt that we definitely needed to respond to this one.
All right.
So this one was reaching out to me by name. So Roger, I'm part of the Australian MAGA community, and I wanted your view on the Liberation Day tariffs. What's so bad with America putting the same tariff, and in some cases half, that other companies, I think he means countries, are putting on America? So I thought that I should... So I really wanted to pick this one out because I think this is probably our first self-confessed MAGA question, and concerningly is come directly to me, which I don't know what that says about the situation.
You're the safe space.
So to defend my honor that I'm in no way MAGA aligned, and I also want to kind of address this question because I do think that somewhere in that question is the heart of a reasonable surface level case to be put forward by the general public that doesn't really follow the main story or the details very well. Our dear friend Trump got up with a giant graph or a printout that he held himself, which was very awkward, of a giant table of all the different countries around the world, the tariffs that they place on American goods and services and things, and then what the response will be, or the reciprocal tariff will be on these countries by America. And if you listened to the speech and you saw the table, you'd be forgiven to say, hey, it looks like all these other countries are pretty mean. They're putting these giant tariffs and taxes on America. Why shouldn't they try to even the score? And it looks like they're being generous because they're not actually even putting the same tariff. They're like Big Brother. They're only charging them half, the 50% discount. So let's lay down some semantics. A tariff is a consumer tax, essentially, right? It is paid for by the importer and passed on to the consumer. So, and I think that I've seen a lot of things online that are getting very confused because of the way this administration, the Trump administration, is messaging this, that somehow other countries will pay for the tariffs. No, like a tariff is paid by your own citizens, right? And the importers. And we had different chats before the election where we said that, I kind of went into bat and said that tariffs can have a control purpose. They also can be used as a bargaining stick of sorts in negotiations to get other countries to reduce their tariffs. And that was definitely and has been definitely the hope of what the Trump strategy was, but that is becoming very hard to justify, that he is doing this just to get other people to bring down their tariffs and to be free trade. And I think just specifically on the chart, right, that's doing the rounds at the moment, the chart that Trump held up is like dangerously misleading. And I think the way in which they've defined the effective tariffs that other countries place on the United States bends the meaning of tariff to a point where it just actually does just bullshit. And you should be able to sniff this out, right? I think take South Korea, for example. I believe it clocked in as a 90% tariff or something crazy high like that. And then you think to yourself, oh, why are the South Koreans placing such high tariffs on America? Because they have a freaking free trade agreement with the USA. And actually, in reality, their effective tariffs are negligible. They're like point something percent, not 90. So then you think, well, how did they possibly justify this number of this large number? Is it VAT? What is it? And really, it has nothing to do with tariffs. It's actually just they've taken the trade balance and they've applied it into some crude percentage, right? And I think that when you start to understand that, then you start to understand that these aren't tariffs, right? This is just obfuscation. This is a bad message to send, right? Like I think this is really playing, really misleading the public. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. That this is a crazy move. The markets are absolutely tanked, and even for the MAGA crowd, you should be trying to understand what's going on here, right? But I'll end of soapbox. I'll throw it to you, Andy, if you want to clean up anything.
All right. I think, Roger, you lost the MAGA crowd at, let me explain this. I don't think the MAGA crowd want to understand this. I think they love the rhetoric. I think the rhetoric is, so you're a MAGA supporter, or I don't know how we have a MAGA listener, by the way, but anyway.
We did attend a MAGA event.
If we do have any...
It could be the MAGA stripper that we saw.
Possibly. If we have any MAGA listeners listening to me right now, I would say, I don't think you really want to know or understand any of this stuff. I think it's just like, it's like you're just waiting, like trying to get the talking points so you can, not from us, but from Trump or, JD Vance or whoever else in the administration. Like, what's that like soundbite that you can like echo or continue to like propagate as a, like a reasonably, it's that like mimetic thing, right? Like you say something that's easy to repeat, that soundbite. But on tariffs themselves, yes, I saw that the tariff, calculations were actually based on the trade deficit rather than any actual tariff arrangement. And the silly thing that maybe people don't understand about trade deficits, or what most people outside, let's say, kind of people who track these things, like in, say, national, statistical accounting or economists, is that a trade deficit is like a mathematical identity, right? So the only way you can have a trade deficit is to actually have an investment surplus. So when you look at countries and they actually have deficits, trade deficits, it's because there's actually investment flows that to the dollar fund that trade deficit. So we can at the same time say, oh, it's a great thing for a country to attract foreign investment. You probably have Trump saying, well, we want foreign companies to relocate factories into America. Yeah. We want them to invest in America. Well, how do you think those companies get the dollars that they need to invest in America? Well, it's funded through the trade account, right? So,
they better say the Trump meme coin.
And the way you can think about it is like currency, right? If you need let's say US dollar, someone has to sell it to you, and that's how it works. So anyway, that's just kind of just where Trump just doesn't understand economics, and he hasn't since the 70s and 80s when he was railing.
He's always thought this was a problem.
Yeah, see, he put like ads in newspapers in this, I think it was the 70s or the 80s about Japan, right? And then so all of this stuff is just complete misunderstanding. It's not going to have the effect, even in some kind of like superficial way where you could say, well, it's bad for all of those reasons, but at least it might have this positive, like he has it to the extent there's any redeemable aspect to this. He hasn't even optimized the strategy for that, because all that the rest of the world see is like a completely incompetent administration that's changing everything, and there's no sense of like continuity of what policy arrangements are going to be in place for when you're making investments to onshore into manufacturing processes into America. They're not like 6-month kind of investment time horizons. They're like 30-year time horizons. And so what like, are you going to make those investment decisions off the back of Trump's kind of like cardboard cutout chart that he put up? So anyway, it's bad policy.
They really should have got someone to hold that for him, by the way. I think the whole trade deficit thing is just, it's not a bad thing. You have you and I have a trade deficit with Woolies, right? It doesn't mean Woolies is screwing us over. Well, it does actually, but in other ways. But, I just think that, so what I would say to this MAGA listener is like, if you want to take it to the next level, I think you have to find a different way of getting into it. You have to acknowledge some of the misleading information that's being presented, right? And then you can also form an argument for a greater strategy. I would pin, the most viable line for the MAGA community is that perhaps this is a greater strategic play to leverage and try to get other countries to drop their tariffs.
No.
Right,
Roger, stop this 4D chess argument. They're playing they're playing.
I'm trying to
they're
give
not even playing checkers.
Andy, I'm trying to give this listener respect.
They're playing
because,
like McDonald's Monopoly.
Andy, I'm trying to give this listener respect, right? Like I think that
we don't need to give MAGA respect.
No, because
they're dumb.
This
they're dumb bastards. Forget it.
This could happen, right? Like it's still a possibility that it could be a road to more free trade in some areas and more protection in other more national security areas.
It's not. Because
if I was stuck in that corner, that's where I'd be putting my chips.
Yeah, well, but see, goes back to what I was saying earlier, Roger, is that this is like we're looking for the rhetorical like flourish here, right? We're looking for the way to kind of like, pivot, do the little dance so that it kind of sounds reasonable. But that's not what's going on. Like we know that's not what's going on. We know there's no like redeeming feature of these tariff policies. We know Trump's not playing 4D chess. We know there's no grand strategy. We know this is just born out of low IQ politics, right? Low IQ understanding of the world. And we don't, I don't want to swim in that, repulsive bath that like of sweaty juices of, these fucking fat, sweaty men like JD Vance. Like, forget it. I don't want to be there.
Hey,
I don't want to talk
fat.
about that.
He's just big boned, right? Like,
well, he lost a lot. He's on Ozempic or something. But no, I'm just not for it.
Which is now being
I just think if you're a MAGA person and you're not like a MAGA person because you just don't know any better because the only like news service that you watch is like Breitbart, or I don't know if they have a TV version of it, but you only read that kind of stuff in that universe. Like I can kind of imagine like, people who grow up in Scientology stays, in Scientology, and you can't, in some ways you can't blame young people who, are Scientologists. But
well, I think you've got to be generous though, and don't you think that a better way to tackle this is like, I've answered the question with a sense of like not trying to belittle the, just because you're aligned to the MAGA group.
I think they're troll. I think the question's trolling you, Roger, to begin with. So
trolling. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know, but I just think that there is a case of trying to acknowledge some of the holes, but positioning yourself right. And I would say to this listener, like, don't stop asking questions, and
there are no stupid questions, only stupid people. The other thing is just, and the last thing I would say on it is that even if the tariffs on that chart were right, like as in I don't know what, like just pick a number, like say Mexico, I don't know what
Vietnam at 97%.
Okay, Vietnam has 97% tariffs on US imports or exports, whatever. Even if that were true, it like tariffs is one of these areas of like economic policy where it's still would not be in the interest of America to put on an equivalent like equalized tariff, because I mean partly because of your point, because it's actually paid for. It actually prevents trade. Like trade is like it's the equivalent of saying, well, we actually shouldn't trade in our own economy. Like what we should do is, the guy who like fixes, like replaces the soles on your shoe or whatever should also like perform heart surgery. Like we just should, like we shouldn't actually specialize. We shouldn't, grow economic structures that allow economies of scale and specialization, expertise to develop. That we should just forget that for a second and, let's not trade with Vietnam. Like, even though Vietnam, I don't know what like their top export is.
The irony is in Vietnam that actually there's been such a big movement away from China because of security issues, and it's exactly what the West has wanted to kind of push manufacturing into neighboring centers like Vietnam and India, so that there's less reliance on China. And now you're punishing them for doing that. But I think, how I feel really bad in this situation is Israel. You don't hear me saying that very often, but they have already released a few years ago the whole zero tariffs on America. And even they, who have zero tariffs, are still getting slapped with a 17% tariff.
We actually used to have a trading system before this, the WTO, and they used to actually work through, disputes about trade policy and, ensure fair and equal treatment between countries. We actually had a global trading system before this doofus like came and like
Are we going to get
smash everything in the
Prime
China
USA
shop.
beef now on our shelves?
I don't think so. All right, let's move on. Enough of this bastard.
All right. So, what we're going to talk about today is actually a message I received from you in a bit of a frenzy last week saying, hey, have you seen the Netflix series Adolescence? And I went to which I said, I've heard about it, haven't watched it yet. And then you proceeded to become the mayor of Slam City on it. So tell me, Andy, tell me what's the beef?
All right, I'm going to lay out my, lay my sort of proposition on the table, and we can go from there. So I kind of reacted a little bit to this because it was getting a lot of very positive, attention, very positive press, critically acclaimed. The social. There was like a moment of conversation about the Netflix TV series. So, part of my view was a reaction to that. So, I don't know if I watched it in isolation, I probably wouldn't react to it at all.
There's a commentary as well, though, right? It's not just the acclaim.
Yeah, but it's the impact it's had on like the conversation, right? As well. Yeah. Anyway, so because when I was watching it, I just said, I'm just not sure I want to watch a show like this. Like this was during when I was watching it, and I actually struggled to finish it because, by I think the second episode, I just sort of felt I can see what they're setting this show up to be, and I'm not really a fan of it. So what am I not a fan of? So first of all, for those who haven't seen it, I kind of want to balance the the tension between how do you actually have this conversation without spoiling at least part of it. But basically, it's a riff on the sort of the toxic masculinity and some of the I guess social media figures that young people, young men, young boys in particular are exposed to, and the impact that it has on it. And it involves a murder of a girl. So I don't know if we need to give more details than that to have the conversation, but
I think so, a little bit more.
Okay, well, let's just we'll get that out naturally, because I think that's enough to start with. But if we have to get more details, and you just go and watch it if you don't follow what the conversation is. But there's this opening scene which is very kind of draws you in. It's very what's going on here, and the way it's filmed, it's one of those ones where it's filmed with one camera shot, and the whole series is filmed with just this one camera shot, and it's showing everything in real time, so there's no cuts and things like that. Anyway, so the first episode was quite good, I thought. So what did I take issue at? It's a piece of fiction that the community or the commentators or all the the people who want to talk about all these issues have treated as a documentary. So it's like they've seen this fictional take of a school in the UK and an ecosystem of young people in the UK, and they're shocked by it, by a fictional depiction of a school and a social setting in the UK. They're shocked by it. They've treated it like that's fact, and that's a documentary of real life, something that's actually happened, and they're reacting to it in that way. But not only is it fictional, but it's completely unbelievable. Not so much that a murder took place and that obviously there's a perpetrator and that doesn't happen, but more so that the way the show depicts this as something the whole community almost tacitly either supports or is okay with, or is almost doesn't care or isn't that interested or doesn't care for the victim, when that's just not true. That's just not how community would react to something like that. And I just didn't like it how the reaction was trying to infer all of these societal problems from what was actually, for me, an unbelievable fictional account. But anyway, there's lots more to it, but let's go. That's enough for me to say for now.
Yeah. So it was quite interesting, I think, that your take on it. And so just to kind of beef it out a little bit more, like you said, setting in a UK town, they've got thick UK accents, and it's kind of in a slightly more working class, kind of proper middle class environment as well, so not an upper middle class environment. And I think the thing that we're missing here in terms of context is that this is a 13-year-old boy who commits the murder against a girl at the school. And unlike a lot of TV, this boy looks 13 years old. Like he actually looks like he's 13. So he's very, this kind of like Caucasian. He still has that kind of boyish angelicness to his features. He looks like a small child. He doesn't look like a man. So I think that's also part of the dynamic that's at play here, that he still looks like a kid. He still looks innocent. And they're trying to infer this thing of, innocence lost, and actually the corruption of the youth at the hands of, online propaganda and radicalization. And something that, there's a big part of this is incel or red pill culture, right? And for those who don't know, incel is something that has permeated the language and the lexicon in the last, 5 years. It stands for involuntary celibate. So basically it's these disenfranchised men who believe that they will never be able to have sex with a woman because they have been genetically cursed, and women only want to go after the very top echelon of high-value men, and they're forever shunned, and that makes them feel ostracized, and that leads them to be misogynistic and hate women, and the only way to get with them is to trick them or whatever it is, right? So this is this real thing where there are incel forums and material and content that are made for this group, and it kind of tends, they're inferring a radicalization process from there. Andrew Tate is a feature of this kind of community. He gets a call out in the show as well. But basically this idea of, corruption of the youth through this type of propaganda and ideology, right? So that's at play here too. And it's also about this idea of parents. And I think this is the strongest one. And I wonder whether this is part of I'd be curious whether this is something that you're reacting to as well. That's this rather unsavory, is that the show plays around with how responsible, how accountable the parents are, especially for fathers. This idea that perhaps there's a role model issue, or perhaps they're not paying enough attention to their kids and what they're ingesting online, and this idea of what kind of blueprint of masculinity are we setting for our boys. So and this is also permeates some of the messaging you hear online, where people are saying, this is a wake up call for all parents of boys. Important message for fathers who are complacent about raising their boys not to be toxic little sea bags, right? Like, I think that's kind of the general messages that you're hearing online, and it's very reminiscent of the frenzy that we have around domestic violence issues and violence against women. And I think that it's we're in danger of that moral panic.
I think the problem is, if they wanted to make that point, they should have done it. If that was the objective, and I don't necessarily know that it was, but they should have made it more directly, or more subtly, or more with more nuance. But I think there was a particular, episode 2, they're in the school, right? And that particularly, I found that, and I'd be curious to know what someone like our teacher friend Will, who is a school teacher, would. I mean, obviously it's different contexts, different countries, and all of that. But it depicts a school where. Imagine this, right? A student has just been murdered. Another student in the school has been arrested for her murder. And the cops are coming around to, investigate or, do some, interviews or whatever. And all of the kids are larking about nothing's happened. Now, I took a little bit of issue at that because actually, we went to the same school and we went through an experience where a student did unfortunately pass away. Yeah. Schools are not like that when that happens. Schools are incredibly, somber places. People are mourning. This is not how kids are reacting. And then added onto that, and this is the bit that I found really egregious in the depiction, and why it just utterly offended me, that it would portray it in this way, is that it just gave this thread, and there were multiple threads of this throughout the series, of the boys being on the murderer's side, as though they can't tell right from wrong, or they have no regard for the victim, and that it's almost like this us versus them thing, which I don't like. So all the conversation about someone like an Andrew Tate and misogyny and all that, that of course that's an issue, but it's just this kind of false depiction. And there's this scene at the very end where there's this guy in the hardware store who comes up to the dad who's of the boy who's committed the murder, It's like, oh yeah, look, I'm on his side. Yeah, I've been watching this. You've got to be. It's like, no, in what fucking universe is this going to happen? Anyway, so and then you've got this whole fucking like thought brigade out there on social media, like, oh yes, you need to talk to your, no, this is fucking fiction. It's a Netflix fucking documentary. This isn't real life, everybody. And it just, anyway, I just thought it was
all right. Let me
quite unbelievable, actually.
Yeah. Let me kind of challenge a few elements, right? Or just for discussion for sport. So I must admit, I did think of our high school experience where we had, we had part of our year and particularly close to yourself pass away. And the school-wide mourning, I remember that very, very vividly of how united the school was in mourning. And you're right. That was, I did think about that experience. But what I would say is there's a danger in all of this that we are projecting who we were and what our school was like and what our demographic was like.
I think there's a humanity to that experience that's deeper than social media and any phenomenon.
I just think, Andy, that it's just worth challenging that actually that was our experience. Things have changed. And I'm not saying that it was realistic, but I am saying that, this is a work of fiction. They're trying to show an extreme of that, but I do think elements of that school dynamic do exist, and we have to sometimes say, not everyone is like us or the people we like to.
I just want to say the other thing is how unrealistic the dynamic in this, like, basically it depicted a school with really bad school behavior where like the culture, like just control had been lost. It was just chaos. Now, I know there are schools out there where they don't have good cultures, where student behavior can be a problem. But those teachers, like, they needed to get some like teachers to consult whoever wrote the script on like actually how teachers respond in situations like that, because those teachers that they depicted in the show, like, I'm not a trained teacher, but even I know that's not how you do it, right?
Well, I think we should get Teacher Will on, because I did think the teacher that was just like, absent and had given up and just thought the class were a bunch of animals. I agree that was unrealistic. But the other guy with the shaved head, that the second teacher, I thought that was a little bit more realistic. That
I don't remember the specific.
There are like teachers like that, and that seemed a little bit more authentic to me. The most inauthentic part of that was the fact that the detective actually came and was talking to the children about, we're here to try to find the knife. That to me was like, what? You don't hold a school assembly to say we're on the lookout for a murder weapon, right? Like, that's just not what. Like, that's not what happens.
But see, these are the little details where it just didn't get it right, because I know it's got a lot of credit for, oh yes, it's the one camera thing. Like, oh yeah, it shows you the whole process, but it's like, no, that makes it more unbelievable. Because for me, like, for anyone who listens to, like, knows about my YouTube kind of watching habits, I watch like these videos with police interactions all the time. This, like, it can take them like the police like half an hour just to like give you a fucking like search record slip, let alone like from the moment they barge your door in to like the moment you're being interviewed is like 15 minutes. Like, but these details count because it just actually cheapens the viewer experience, because it makes it like look not real. Like, it's like, this isn't, like, sometimes you do need the cut, like you need the scene cut, some passage of time, picking it up again, because otherwise you're condensing and you're speeding everything up. So anyway, that was the sort of so I just think this is the most overrated TV show in a very long time, in my opinion. So it might be like an IMDb, I don't know if anyone follows that, or Rotten Tomatoes. Like, it might be like a fresh, or it might be like a above kind of 6 score kind of thing. I don't know, but like, it's at the moment everyone's like giving it like a 9.9 or something. It's not worth that score. It was average. It was below average even, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah. Look, I'm gonna pay a little bit of bread where it's due. I think that some key roles were acted very well, right?
I'm fine with that. Like, the kid was good. The 13-year-old was a great actor. Yes, I'll pay that.
And the father was a very like.
I'll pay that. I'll pay that.
a lot of the performances were noteworthy, I think.
And that's what gave it the credit.
Yeah, yes. And I agree. Like, I mean, I think for most people, though, if they didn't hear the fact of this, logistical feat of a one-shot take and all this kind of stuff and tracking with one long thing, most people wouldn't even really notice it straight away. And they would actually probably just find the pacing quite tedious. I remember when he's at the police station and he's getting checked in at the very first episode, they take his fingerprints and they go through all fucking 10 fingers. Like, they make you sit there and witness him carrying out all 10 of his fingers on a fingerprint thing, right? Press here, okay, now next one, now this finger. And that I found just like, that was unnecessarily tedious for very little. And I know that's what they were trying to portray, like the futility and like the kind of the rigmarole of it all. But like you said, it's a weird dynamic where the audience feels like the pacing is off, even though you're condensing the storyline horrifically. So I agree with that. I want to get to the actual bit that triggers me though, right? Like, so away from the hype of it all, because I think that what people see what they try to take away is like a confirmation bias around how, this alarmist, this kind of moral panic around our boys, right? And around masculinity. Did any of that stuff with those comments that I read out, like, do you have any view on that? The ones around like, this is something all fathers need to watch around their boys, and this is a wake-up call, and you need to be paying. Like, what is your view on that? Because people would say, like, incels are real. There have been crimes committed under this set of ideologies. This is a real thing.
All right. So there are definitely people who will commit violent crimes like this at the extremes of the distribution of the population. But they will do that not because of Andrew Tate. They will do that because they are just at the extremes of the distribution of the population. I don't think, and I'll say if an Andrew Tate like follower and obsessive commits a murder or a violent crime against someone, I'll actually go so far as to say that's not actually Andrew Tate's fault. That's that there's someone who commits violent crimes but the risk, the part, like, where we're vulnerable with this kind of like culture, right? And the impact on like young people with Andrew Tate or that whole cohort. I mean, you could probably extend it to like freaking Joe Rogan, right?
No, don't you dare.
I mean, there's this spectrum of the manosphere, right? And then there's like maybe like Joe Rogan's like the equivalent of like soft porn, right? And then you go all the way up to like hardcore stuff with it's I think it's along a continuum. Okay, let's not go because but like I think it
Joe
is.
Rogan
right?
is not misogynistic, right? Like, I don't like. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I kind of think he's part of like a world that is not far off. But anyway, there's like, but like they cause different issues. They cause different issues relating to like more subtle issues around like respect for women, around like how to relate to women and girls if you're young, like, and I think those and we know this to be true because the opposite's true, right? If you take like a super extreme, like if you take girls and you take women and you expose them to like super extreme kind of like feminist perspectives, that like that's equally crazy and nuts and absurd, right? So we know it's true for both genders, for both sides, or for anyone for that matter. Like the more extreme you go, it's going to kind of untangle the threads that keep us all together. So so I think I would never say that the essence of what those comments aren't true, that you need to pay attention and be aware. But this freaking TV show is not a documentary, and it's not a wake-up call. This is not, there's no insight in this TV show because it centers around a horrific murder. It's just the wrong problem.
They tie in some more direct messages, right? Like, I mean, they are drawing out here that they're trying to give this idea of like it can happen to any boy.
Yeah, it can, but it's not consequential from.
No, I know, but just hear me out here. So, like, for example, they go to lengths in the series to draw out the father's aggression or his view of like traditional masculinity. You know, he's a tradie. He's tradie with a heart of gold, but he's got anger problems, right? And under stress, his default kind of problem solving is one of male aggression, right? They labor that to try to challenge the audience to say, hey, what kind of responsibility is here as like an archetype of masculinity? And does that have impacts to your kids.
But that doesn't lead you to. I mean, that might be that might be a message that it could make, but I don't think that translates to like violent crime. Like I just think
they're trying to say it's a ladder, though, right?
Yeah, but I think this is where it goes a bit wrong in my head. Like as so, like someone like I think the kid. And again, I'm sort of don't want to give too many spoilers away, but like the kid is clearly like has some sort of like psychopathic kind of side to him, right? Because you can get frustrated that like someone cut you off when you're driving your car, and you can like stick your finger up at them or something, and that's like yes, okay, that's not generally like you should try and control yourself or whatever, but it's not like I don't think that's on the same spectrum of. Then you go like crazy and you go in this outrage and you start stabbing people. Like it's like I just don't think that's I don't buy that, and I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that gives us anything to work with meaningfully and practically. And anyway, like I said, I'm not. For me, it's just like people reading too much into a fictional depiction of something that happened in some producer's or some screenwriter's mind, and they're treating it like it's freaking real. Like, anyway,
Yeah. All right. Let me jump down from playing devil's advocate now and put my view forward, which is the biggest thing that I have, like the biggest problem I have with the series, which is, and it's because I see it seeping into an actual narrative online, and to some people I have spoken to about it, is this idea of they believe, because of this series, that a normal middle-class boy with no trauma in a loving family, stable family environment with no abuse can watch material online and become violent and kill a girl or a woman. And I think that's the bridge too far for me, right? Because I think what we know about this this level of criminality is that there is always some kind of abuse and trauma at the center of it. And I think it's a dangerous message to kind of try to thread this narrative that it's like, it's like the whole not all men situation. They like say, no, it could be all men, right? And you've always got to be vigilant. And actually you can take a very normal boy in a stable environment with no trauma, and even they can be radicalized to kill. And I just really struggle to make that leap. And I think it's a dangerous thing to put out there, personally. I think that, you should be vigilant to understand potential traumas and how they're being bullied or ostracized or whatever it is. But I think that message there that's starting to kind of get out there, that it can be anyone, like they can walk amongst us and stuff. And yes, like you said, there can be psychopathy and all that stuff that's just in the extremes of the distribution, in a we need to talk about Kevin situation. But this idea that you can take someone in the middle and bash them out to the sides enough that they would kill someone, I think that that's not a good message.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the last thing I want to say about it is if you haven't watched it, watch it. Like for me, my journey was the first episode was like kind of thrilling. So I'm not trying to sort of poo-poo on the series itself to say like, don't watch it, it's rubbish or anything like that. But the first episode was thrilling for me. Oh, that's probably the best word I could use to describe it. The second episode is when all of my kind of doubts came into mind, because it's centered around a school scene, and make up your own mind. But to me, that school scene, I became very cynical very quickly, because I just thought, here we go. Like it's trying to depict, here's a broken society, broken like school system, broken youth. And I think we can have more as a parent of, someone of not pretty much the same age. I can tell you it's not like that in real life. Certainly not here in Australia. And I doubt very much it is in the UK as well. So I think we can have a lot more hope and optimism for our young people than what this show suggests. It's a documentary. It's not real life. And I think it's wildly inaccurate. So that's all I have to say.
Well, here's just one last question that I'm curious about. If you found out that your son followed Andrew Tate channels, would you do anything?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
What would you do?
Like, you're not listening. Well, no, I don't think you can just say you're banned, because I think if you say you're banned, they don't truly, like, they don't really, there's no lesson there. So I think you got to explain it. You got to say, look, this isn't, I'd do the same thing if he started listening to Joe Rogan as well, frankly.
I don't want to see you buying elk from the store, boy. No, but Andrew Tate, actually, I did see a short clip of him responding to the Adolescence series. And
was this the same day that he like got arrested for like domestic violence?
I can't keep up on all his arrests in Romania.
No, I mean in America.
Oh no, see, I don't even know. But he said pretty much, look, I do agree that of the red pill theory that 80% of women are chasing after 20% of men. But that's where I depart from the premise of the show, that I don't say to the boys, the youth, give up. I say, try to become the 20%, right? And I think that's fair from his message, that he's trying to say, accept the reality, improve yourself, get up there. But, you know, it lacks any kind of moral clarity and ethical clarity, but that is his message. I think that, you know. But
we know that that's, as an aside, we know that whole 80-20 thing is just like, it's just apparently wrong. Like, it's clear.
No,
that
it's not though, because
of course it is. Of course it is.
Just hear me out. That the data that they have with, say, online. This is a trap that people in our age group may fall into. That the game has changed from when we were dating. The online dating stuff shows that actually, like, the vast majority, there's this kind of funneling, this behavior change that's happening.
But that's just like saying that
there are more and more single people. There are more and more kind of like these people not having sex, younger people and stuff.
No, but that's like saying 80% of people want to, if they could, buy a 5-bedroom house in the eastern suburbs next to the beach. Like, if they could have it. But people find something else that they love if they can't get their idealized version of what they want. And that happens. People do that. And I know it might be different to when when I was young, we didn't have bloody Tinder and all that stuff. So
I'm saying is that has had a material impact on the behavior.
Yeah, but like I'm just making the point that, like, you know, it isn't true that only 20% of men have been in a relationship before. You know, like
no, but I'm saying that they want that, right? Like they that's what.
But again, that's exactly like saying, like, you know, people's ideal version is like, yeah, I want a nice like beachside mansion. Like, okay, I can't have that, so I go back to what I can have. You know,
the difference is they can access that for a while now, Andy. Like, you can get someone to fly you out to Dubai and take a poop on you now, right? Like, you couldn't do that when we were growing up, right? I'm serious. Like, Dubai potty parties weren't a thing. Now they can go on to Instagram, they can hit up this stuff, arrange them to come over. That supply chain
I don't know what you're
didn't
talking
exist.
about now, Roger.
You don't know about the Dubai potty parties?
You lost me.
All right, let's cap it there then.
All right. Catch up.
See ya.